So as I mentioned in the last video, after we've learned how to work with loops and get things to repeat within a loop, whether it's a while loop or a for loop, that's great and you can have a ton of fun with that. And then the next step that we're going to learn is rotation. Now, anything can be rotated, but it's a lot of fun, I think fun, to rotate things that are within a loop because then you can get spirals and cool effects like this image that I have here. So there's a PowerPoint here and you can download that and go through it and it's just going to give you some more examples. I'm just going to work directly in processing and I don't know, I might pull up the PowerPoint here and there. So here's a sketch that is practicing the while loop. And what I have is a rectangle and I'm saying while my X is less than 250 and my Y is less than 250, give me a rectangle that has X and Y, and you know I like my rectangles to actually be squares. So it's 50-50 is for the width and the height, and they're increasing by 10. And this gives me basically a diagonal. Okay, so just as a bit of review, when we're using the while loop, we are initializing and declaring our variables in the draw right above them. And that'll make a little bit more sense once we do a whole bunch of while loops, one right after another. We're just placing them. In part, it's just an organizational thing. This will still work if I do put them up here, but once we have a bunch of while loops and a lot of variables, it becomes more complicated. So this is the first step of really what we need to be able to work with rotation. We want to get this to look more like a circle here, I've just used a rectangle, and then I'll do another example after with different shapes, and I have it moving across the screen in a while loop. Now, you'll notice in my PowerPoint that most of the time I am using just one variable, and I'm giving that variable to both the X and the Y. So I'm going to start out with two separate variables here, and then I'm going to cut it down just so you can see. It's like a simpler way to do it. But there's no set rule of how you're going to do this. So kind of watch and absorb, do your own sketches, and then you can tweak things as you like. So hopefully you'll have fun and you'll kind of play with it. All right, so here I have my while loop, it's repeating, and the next step is to rotate. So the rotation is going to go inside the while loop because what I want to do is every time it draws one of these rectangles and it moves it out by 10, I want each one of those to get rotated by 10, right now it's going to be 10. So it's a function called rotate, and the argument it takes is going to be in radians. You guys remember radians? Maybe you have that worksheet. If not, I'm going to try to find that worksheet on radians, but it's the degree that includes like pi. 2 pi is equals to 360 degrees. And hopefully what you remember is that radians are like generally really small numbers here, like 0.2, something like that. So I want each one of those rectangles slash squares, whatever you want to call them, just to turn like a tiny bit. So I'm going to put in a really small number here. I'll put in like 0.2 for, oh, I meant to put 0 there. 0.2. I'm going to rotate them. All right, now let's play it again. All right, so they are rotated. They're rotated at the top corner. And that may be, you would think, because I set them to be at 0, 0. Okay, so let's just see if I did set them to be at 100, 100. So they're not starting at the top corner. Okay, so now they did start down lower, but they're still just rotating like right here. And that's, I actually wanted, what I want is for them to rotate from the middle. So I want to make the middle 0, 0. That's kind of like a little bit of an odd concept, but let me explain this. I'm going to put these guys back 0, 0. I'm going to do what's called translate. When I translate, I am changing the point of origin of my screen. So currently, when I say 0, 0, that's this top corner. But what if when I said 0, 0, it brought it to the middle? Then the shape would rotate around the middle. So this is called like shifting the matrix. So kind of imagine that on top of your canvas, There's like another transparent canvas, and that's where everything is. And I'm actually just shifting this transparent canvas down so that this is going to be my new point of origin. So when I say 0, 0, it'll be right here. I use that with translate, and I'm going to translate and put it into the middle, which I could say 250, 250, but I like to use system variables. So instead I'm going to say width divided by 2 and height divided by 2, semicolon. Okay, I am translating before my loop. So let's just see what we get now. So now, even though my rectangle starts at the X and the Y and they're both at 0, 0, this is now 0, 0. My middle is 0, 0. And I translated before my while loop because I want to kind of set the stage and have this my new 0, 0. Then I put my while loop, I put in my X and my Y Boolean, and I'm rotating before each one of those. So basically it rotates, it gives me a shape, it adds to it, it rotates, gives me shape, adds to it, rotates, so on and so forth. And you know the difference between the if statement and the while loop is it does all of this before it plays, where the if animates and it shows it all to you. Okay, so we are in the good first steps here. But now, how do I get it to look more like one of these guys? Well, there are just a couple of small things that you can tweak that will make that difference. So starting with, I don't really want them to increase by 10. I want them, if you notice in this here, they're actually a lot closer together. So I'm going to increase them. Instead of by 10, I'm going to say by, let's say like by 0.5. Oh, they are, I put them as integers. My bad. I should have put them as floats so I can use decimals. Let's switch that up. So I'm going to increase them both by small amounts. Okay, boom. That's really made a huge difference, didn't it? At this point, I want to point out, since I'm increasing my X and my Y by the exact same amount, if I wanted to cut down on my variables, I really could use just one of them. I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to get rid of Y, and I'm going to get rid of this part of my Boolean that talks about Y, and I'm going to get rid of this increasing of Y, and instead of Y here, I'm going to put X. Because everything that I put for Y was the exact same that I put for X, and I get the exact same results. So you can do it either way. As I said, there's no set way. Maybe I'm just kind of on the lazy side, and this is the way I've always done it. If you prefer to have separate variables for your X and your Y, feel free to do it that way. If you want to use the same variable, and then let's say I want a difference between the two, I could just say, here's X, and this is X plus 20, for example. All right, so now I've made some nice movement here by just simply, I'm having them repeat closer together. So again, let's back that up. If I say plus 20, let's see the result. Yeah, I'm not getting that spiral because they're just happening too far apart. If I say plus 0.2, I get lots of them, and you get this really cool pattern. Now, how do I control it takes over the entire screen? What controls that is here the Boolean statement. So instead of saying, well, X is less than 250, to control the size of my rotation, it's this number here. So I'll say, well, it's less than 150. And you can see it's getting smaller. I think I'll just make my screen a little bit larger. I'm going to make this 600 by 600 so I have more room to play. And now it is smaller. All right. And let's see, how could I make, if let's say I wanted to have a little bit more of a circle there in the middle. What controls that? So what controls that? It's the X and the Y. Remember, they're both here equaling 0. So I don't exactly want to move them both out like by saying X equals 10. I'm just going to take one of them and say, for example, X plus 50, and that's going to move it 50 pixels out. And now I get this donut hole here. And if that's too large, then I could just make that smaller. All right, so let's do this again with a different shape. I'm just going to copy this. All right, so I'm going to start this over with a line, and I'm just going to put my line at, I'll do variables x, and then x plus 100 to get it to move out of the middle a little bit. And I can put it at 50, 50, and then I need to increase it, x equals x plus, let's say 0.5. Oops. All right, so I should just get a line. Yep, I have my line here, and I have that kind of diagonal. Now I'm going to rotate it, and small numbers because it's in radians. Spell rotate correctly is always helpful. All right, now that's kind of cool. And I'll keep going, and then let's take a look at to see what differences we can get with changing the rotation value. Then the next step is I'm going to change the point of origin so that 0, 0 is in the middle. Do that with translate, width divided by 2, height divided by 2, put that in the middle, and here we are. And now if I don't want it to go out so far, I'm going to reduce this number down, put that to like 150, and that controls here. So the numbers again to tweak. What's in the Boolean statement controls how far out it goes. To control the donut hole, it's what's in here, your x and your y. So if these were both just at x, remember x is 0, 0, I would expect it to start right in the middle. And it does. And that gives me kind of a cool effect. If I want to have it a larger donut hole, and I could put it on either the x or the y, I could say x plus 50, and it increases the donut hole in the middle. And I get a slightly different effect. But so you could try either for this x or for this variable x, but we know it's actually the y. Just add a little bit to it. The 50-50 here controls the length of the line. So if I wanted something longer, I could make that 150. And then the frequency in which it rotates, so how many of them we see, is controlled by this number here. So if I made this a very small number, your numbers here are never going to be, they really shouldn't be like even 2. Let's just see what we get. Yeah, you see how we don't, it's okay, but we've kind of lost that cool effect that we're looking for. So the numbers here are generally going to be about 0.2. That's a pretty cool effect. What did I have before? 0.5, I think. What I had. Okay, we can see what that looks like. Or let's see what 0.5 looks like. That's very intense. So at this point, I'd probably want to add like an opacity to my stroke. And if I did even 0, 0, it's going to just be even more dense. No, yeah. Sometimes that happens. It just takes a second to load the whole thing because it's a little intense. Okay, and then lastly, like let's try for a different shape, like a Bezier. So Bezier, I know, needs to have 8 coordinates. I'm just going to copy this one. And I'm going to paste 2 times so that we have that at least as a setup, and I can start then tweaking it. So let's just try, I'm just going to try some various numbers. Let's see. Oh, I could start with that, and then maybe here I'll move this shape out. I'm not, there's no plan here. I'm just kind of adding, like, oh, what kind of numbers could be interesting, just as long as everything is not right on top of itself. I'm just kind of moving things around. Maybe try plus 200. I just don't want things right on top of themselves, so plus 10. Oh, let's try a minus here instead, minus 50. And here, let's try like a minus 100. And let's see what we get. Ooh, that's kind of cool and was totally unexpected. All right, and that's just plopping in some numbers and playing. So you know what could be fun is go into tweak mode, and you could try just making some other adjustments. So that was just copying and pasting, and then just making, I had 2 numbers that are fixed, and then everything else is just plus 200, minus 100, things like that. And then you could try like adding a fill or taking away a fill or doing anything like that. All right, so before we move on to like how do you make multiples of these and then interactive, just spend some time working with a single shape in your while loop, and remember, and then tweaking the three different things here. So this controls how big the circle is. This controls the type of rotation that you see, because this is how it rotates. So this, it should be a small number. And then this controls how many of the shapes we see, because this is the repeat. And you can go through my PowerPoint, and I have some like challenges, like how do you go and make the bigger donut hole and things like that. All right, and then when you feel comfortable with that, move on to the next video.